Dear colleagues and friends, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. And greetings to you all from the Communion Office in Geneva. First, I want to welcome you all to this event, marking the International Women's Day. This is a key moment on the International Gender Justice calendar, and more so for the LWF. We know that the COVID-19 pandemic is having an adverse impact on women and girls in particular. It threatens to reverse decades of progress in education, employment, and socio-economic status. It is therefore even more important that we step back and we celebrate women's achievements today, but let this also be a day of reflection. How far have we come as LWF in our quest for gender justice and inclusivity? What are the obstacles that we have yet to overcome? I want to start by acknowledging all the women on this webinar. To the women in leadership across the LWF and beyond, we value you. We celebrate and we honor you today. Your contribution to our global witness as a communion of churches is unquestionable. You lead with the highest level of professionalism and integrity. Thank you. To all our female staff in the Communion Office and the World Service programs, you continue to give selflessly to the cause, despite the challenges brought about by COVID-19. I recognize the multiple roles that most of you carry at work, in your community, and at home. Some of these roles have become even more demanding this year, yet you have continued to serve with efficiency and dedication. The global theme for this year's celebration is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. Indeed, COVID-19 has further exacerbated inequality, but we stand with the hope that together, men, women, boys, and girls, we can achieve an equal future despite the challenges. Friends, God has made us equal. As such, as equals, we are called to live, to serve, and to witness in church and society. Let this deep conviction of faith continue nurturing our relationships and our vision. It is strong and it remains powerful, more so in these times of COVID-19. In line with the global theme, let me reiterate that the LWF Communion Office is committed to a gender-just and inclusive workplace where women and men participate equally and at all levels. The 2013 LWF Gender Justice Policy is a major milestone of our long-standing commitment to gender justice. Our 12th Assembly in 2017 reaffirmed this commitment. We strive daily to ensure full implementation of the policy by affording women and men equitable opportunities in the workplace, as well as working towards gender transformative programming and practices. LWF is an equal opportunity employer. In the Communion Office, women make up 59% of staff and 45% of leadership. We know there are still gaps at many levels of our communion, in our member churches, in our world, and in our office. Despite consistent efforts, women represent around 40% of LWF staff globally and less than 30% of leadership. Women from the Global South are particularly underrepresented at all levels, whilst women are now visible in leadership in both church and society, many of them continue to face obstacles, resistance, and backlash. Overall, participation has improved over the last years, but we are not yet there where we should be and where we aspire to be. The commitment for equal participation requires long-term vision and a sustained commitment. We still have a long way to go and shall continue working on this. There is still need for more transformed mindsets where justice takes center stage and inclusive behaviors be forged. We should therefore continue to challenge inequality, gender stereotypes, and everyday misrepresentations of women in leadership now more than ever. As I conclude my intervention, I want to acknowledge here the women who are breaking ground for the sake of the equal relations into which God calls us. In the next few days and weeks, we shall be remembering these women from the past and from the present, who have ventured into leadership in church and society, often facing challenges and opposition. Follow our news and our social media. There will be amazing stories of courage, hope coming up. Happy International Women's Day. Today, we remember and celebrate. We reflect and we commit. Tomorrow and the days that follow shall then be days of ongoing work for women in leadership to achieve an equal future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Martin, for your inspiring words and for your personal commitment to gender justice. Let us now go straight into our panel discussion. And I'm honored today to have been joined by 5 distinguished leaders. The first one is Dr. Mussimi Kanyoru, who is an accomplished leader with extensive experience in women's movements and organizations. Mussimi has many years of experience in international non-governmental organizations, global multilateral organizations, and ecumenical agencies. She is the immediate past president and CEO of the Global Fund for Women, and she has served as an advisor on gender issues with the World Bank, the United Nations, UN Women, and various other organizations. Kanyoru is a published author and editor of books, articles, and inspirational speeches. She holds a PhD in linguistics from the University of Texas in Austin and a Doctor of Ministry from San Francisco Theological Seminary. She was a visiting scholar of Hebrew and Old Testament studies at Harvard Divinity School. And as you can imagine, from her leadership and experience, she has received numerous awards and recognitions internationally. Welcome, Mussimi. Our second panelist today is Maria Immonen, who is the Lutheran World Federation Director for the Department for World Service. She has worked in development and humanitarian aid for her entire career. She started off in consultancy in companies over 30 years ago. And then she moved on to faith-based organizations early in her career. Her focus has been on human rights, the human rights-based approach, management, and leadership. She has a master's degree in development from the political science faculty at Helsinki University. Welcome to you, Maria. And then thirdly, we have Eva Christina Nilsson, who is the Lutheran World Federation Director for the Department of Theology, Mission, and Justice. Eva Christina is a historian and a journalist. And before joining LWF, she worked for the Church of Sweden for several years, focusing on international diaconia and development cooperation. And then she worked as well as the head of the Middle East unit in the Church of Sweden. Eva Christina was also the General Secretary of the Swedish Mission Council, one of the main ecumenical bodies in Sweden, and also one of the largest strategic partnership organizations for SIDA, Sweden's government body for development cooperation. Welcome to you, Eva Christina. And then we have Adriana Franco Chitanana, who is currently the Lutheran World Federation World Service representative for Colombia and Venezuela. She's based in Bogota since July 2018. Adriana leads the LWF team there, which is supporting the rights of rural, ethnic, and migrant vulnerable communities through the humanitarian development and advocacy, as well as peace work and peace programs. Adriana has a master's degree in international conflict analysis from the University of Kent in Canterbury, and a bachelor's in international relations from the American University School of International Service in Washington, D.C. And then last but not least, we're pleased to receive this afternoon Kwei Juliana Massa, who is an assistant project officer in COVID response, working with the Lutheran World Federation in South Sudan, specifically in Jonglei. She joined the Lutheran World Federation in March 2020 as an intern, but then has risen to leading the work of the LWF in South Sudan on the COVID response. She holds a diploma in business administration from the Cavendish Institute in South Sudan. Welcome to you, Juliana. As we start our panel this afternoon, I'd just like to share a couple of points that I think would be very important to frame our conversation. Today in 2021, there are only 22 countries have heads of states who are women. Out of 119 countries, there have only been 22 countries that have had heads of states and heads of governments who are women. 7.4% of all of the Fortune 500 CEO roles are held by women. Only 21% of government ministries are led by women. Only 25% of all national parliamentaries are women. And 36% of elected members in local government are women. This event today will be a conversation with our leaders that I have introduced, not only from their perspective in working within the LWF, but also from their perspective in their key roles within the humanitarian, ecumenical, and development settings. And I will start with you, Dr. Mussimi Kanyoru. Could you give us a brief introduction to your journey to leadership? How did you get here, and what were some of the significant moments and highlights? Over to you, Kanyoru.
Thank you very much, Isaiah, if I may call you, and I'm happy to be called Musimbi, or with my first name. First of all, I'm just really delighted to be part of this panel, and especially to be together with the leaders that are on this panel, and to acknowledge with thanks our General Secretary Reverend Martin Yunge, for the work that he has done, and especially for the speech that he gave today. I'm happy to be on this panel because it's sort of like a homecoming for me, because I served as the secretary for what we called WICAS, Women in Church and Society, at the Lutheran World Federation for 10 years in the late 80s. And so I was able to sit at the spaces where many of you who are staff of the Lutheran World Federation are, but also had opportunity to travel to many countries where the Lutheran churches are, and visit with the churches and have interaction with women in those places. All this presence for those 10 years in the Lutheran World Federation really gave me a base of international leadership, because it was my second international work, having before worked with the United Bible Societies, again in an international position. Why was this important? This was important because when we come into leadership, and we are coming into intercultural international leadership, we begin what we share in common. And yes, there is a long litany of the lives of women in many countries which look the same, where there's exclusion from leadership, where there's policies both of government and the church that keep women away from leadership or from participation, or whether it is biases that exist in the communities in which we live, sometimes very well developed through our cultures and our religious beliefs. These we share. And what I learned in leadership, that if I was going to stay in leadership, it was not so much how I was in leadership, but how I would participate in removing barriers that keep women away from leadership. So I was in the Lutheran World Federation, for example, when we had many new countries begin to accept the ordination of women. And the way we worked together with the churches and with women to make that acceptable was to get back to the scriptures and really emphasize what the General Secretary said. We are created in God's image, and we are created as equals, men and women. And we are created to serve God and to serve humanity that God has given to us. And I think that for me, it was staying close to the scriptures and opening opportunities for dialogue so that people can be able to listen to each other, that I felt was the biggest base for my leadership at the LWF, that led into my representing the LWF to the first installation of a woman bishop in the US. And now we have several women bishops in our church. But also mass ordination of women, for example, in Finland, India and Tanzania and Namibia and others, also following suit and ordaining women in the years that I was at the Lutheran World Federation. The other important policy area was to ensure that we have policies that actually enforce or help us to claim the place of women. And I think it was my time that we decided on the 40% representation of women in governing institutions of the Lutheran World Federation. And we went further to want the resources that we have in the Federation to also look at them in terms of women having at least 40% share of those resources. There are many things we achieved together. It was not the leadership of one person. It was the leadership of many committees, many women, many different systems that were put in the place. And then the acknowledgement that God really is the ultimate place where we can be able to depend and pray, but also be practical about what we do. There are many things I have learned since, and I want to conclude by saying the most important for me have been to learn to work in society, in church, and elsewhere by being kind to people, making sure that that kindness helps me to embrace people with differences, both of opinions, of leaning, of ideas, etc., because that leads to the natural place where we can be able to accept inclusiveness and where we can be a bridge to those that have different opinions. These are the things that I have learned as I have traveled a long way from the leadership of that time until today, when I have been a CEO several times before, including my final job that I retired from recently, and I have rewired into other forms of leadership.
Thank you very much, Mussimi. Over to you, Maria. As you listen to Mussimi, you hear quite a lot of inspirational words and challenges that you face as you trailblaze as a leader. Could you share with us a bit more about your own journey, Maria?
Thanks very much. Yes, indeed, it's very inspiring to be part of this panel discussion, which, as Mussimi started her introductory words, the fact that LWF has been working with women's role in church and society for so long. It means that those of us who have followed in the footsteps of people like Mussimi have had an easier time than those first trailblazers who started before we came on board. For my own background regarding a journey to leadership, I have to start with my grandmother, who was strong feminist and women's rights advocate throughout her life, and a very inspiring woman in politics in Finland. And she made a lasting impression on me, and I can still hear her voice in my head when I have moments of self-doubt or don't feel very confident in what I'm about to do. She always said to me and to my siblings that there's nothing you can't do that a man can do. And I think that laid a very strong foundation, of course, for my self-understanding as a person with a brain. My mother was also one of the first women who was ordained in Finland. So I've been involved in sort of church-related struggles for women in leadership of the church also through my mother, and seeing that already as a teenager, how very painful and difficult that struggle was in the context of my own church in Finland. Professionally, I've always worked in development and humanitarian aid, and have had an interest in management and leadership issues from a very early point, where I realized that in addition to playing sort of expert roles or being a content person who knew a lot about technical issues, I also wanted to be involved in decision making. And that, of course, then easily leads you to more management related functions. So from the very beginning of my career, I moved into positions that then entailed a broader portfolio where I needed to get engaged in issues related to management. I also took on a number of board positions and committee memberships and so on, which gradually then led to more responsibility in my professional work. From about 2008 onwards, I've then supervised growing numbers of staff and taken on positions where I've been tasked with leadership functions within organizations, responsible then for all aspects of leading certain fields in the work. A special highlight I'd like to just share is that during one of my employment periods, I was actually given a professional development opportunity by my employer and was able to take on a bachelor's degree in leadership and management, which actually I thought it was a very theoretical process with a lot of book learning, and wasn't terribly inspired when I was doing it. But on hindsight, I think it's one of the best investments I've made in my professional life, to actually invest also in theoretical capacity building and learning in the field of leadership and management, which gives a more solid professional basis about the various assets of leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. Eva Christina, Maria mentions voices that have kept on encouraging her from her grandmother and from other leaders that she's had the privilege of working with. And she mentions time and energy she's invested in education and learning to be a leader. I wonder, from your perspective, Eva Christina, does this resonate with you? Could you just tell us a bit more about your own journey?
Thank you very much, Isaiah. It's also a privilege to be here, and I have always seen myself as the one who is walking in the footsteps of others. I'm very grateful to those who have walked before me and made it easier for me as well. I recognize a lot of what Maria is saying, and I grew up on a farm where it was necessary to work together. My parents worked together. They were sharing the responsibility. So I have that with me from the very beginning. But I have also been thinking about what kind of experiences have I got. And I want to mention an experience I had many years ago. I was rather young. I was invited to represent my church in LWF conference, a European conference, together with a colleague who was working for the Archbishop. I got the participant list in advance, and I thought it's something strange with it. And then I counted 78 men and 3 women were going to participate in this conference. I went there, and then I had the experience of my colleague from my church saying, "I'm sorry, but I'm here only with a young woman." He said it in plenary. And of course, that was not very encouraging. And I had to make up my mind, should I be just thrown out like this, or should I claim my space? Then during the conference, I was asked to be part of a panel on climate and care for creation. I had an evening to prepare for being in that panel, but I thought I will show all these people that I have something to say. I have some experience from my church. And it turned out that I could give a convincing message. And one after another of the participants came up to me after that panel saying, "Oh, this was interesting. You have something to contribute with." And somehow with this conference, as a young person, being told that I'm only young, I'm only a woman, I came out of the conference somehow standing on my feet. And I think this experience made me convinced that, yes, you have to claim the space. You can easily be thrown out, but you have to claim the space with humility, of course, and bringing competence to the table. I have had different kind of leadership roles, very much related to programmatic leadership, leading processes, and so on. When I came to the Swedish Mission Council as the General Secretary, this was an organization 100 years old with several traditions. I was the first woman, and I was the first lay person to be leading this organization. And it was a very broad ecumenical organization. I came into contexts that I had never been into before, where the normal thing was that the woman was the spouse and accompanying the man who was really doing the work. And I even remember a conference when I got a badge calling me Mrs. and then the name of my male colleague. So I had to tell them that I'm on my own. I'm the General Secretary of this organization. But having said that, for me it has been important, and I could put it in this way. I have been blessed both in my private life and in my work life to relate to men who think gender justice is important. Going to those conferences when they would greet my male colleague first, unknown people, but thinking he was the very person to greet. They were always quick to say, and yes, here is the General Secretary. And it was always a lot of embarrassment related to this, but they were standing up, and it has been very much like this in my whole life. I also want to think of all the mothers I have, those who have been walking before me, who have been very supportive to me, and they have been role models. But realizing this is a constant struggle. You can never lean back, you can never sit down. And we see it. I mean, when you look all over this wide communion in the different member churches, how different it looks like. We are here to support and walk together with all the different member churches. And the last thing I want to say is that we need to work together. women and men in order to make changes. This is really something I have learned throughout my professional life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eva Christina. Adriana, I've had the privilege of working with you over the past year in the difficult context of Central America, sometimes dealing with difficult advocacy issues. And I wonder from your perspective, as you listen to Mussimi, you listen to Maria, you listen to Eva Christina, what resonates with you? How has your journey been in terms of leading humanitarian and development work in your region? Over to you, Adriana.
Thanks, Isaiah. Yeah, I think maybe I can start with who I am. Muy buenos días desde Colombia. Good morning from Colombia. I'm a Peruvian American, and I'm a mother of 2 boys, 3 and 7 years old. And I mention this because this is also very much part of my journey, aside from the professional development. In my family, there was a lot of inequality, less so now as the years pass, but definitely a patriarchal tone had been set from my grandparents, and actually only one other lady previous to me had a master's degree, so had higher education. So for me, I grew up wanting more for women, wanting more for myself, really, and wanting to very much fight and earn for whatever space I was able to access. So yeah, I think also it's a bit tied to, not because I'm Latin American or part Latin American. Also, of course, my features are more from the French side. So I think there's definitely a privilege in having lighter skin, even though I'm a woman, but I have access to other areas or other spaces, or maybe I'm more acceptable than other people. So very much aware of that. And yes, just wanting to earn things for myself. But what I've also noticed is throughout the years, echoing a bit what Eva Christina said, there have also been open-minded men who have, either from other organizations or above in a hierarchy where I was working, or even below when I was in a leadership position, because those things would happen, no? Then other people thinking, oh, well, that guy must be the boss. Well, no, this is the manager, please. And so that's been also really helpful. So it's not only been other women, but I do want to recognize that being able to see other women professionally in a high level of leadership, maybe not the top leader of the organization, but in charge of a country program, in charge of a region, that was definitely inspiring to me. And I also picked up a bit of clues along the way of how we can help each other as women. And I think there's been a few things which have been useful for me. One is reaching out to other women leaders, whether or not it's a bit above, a bit below, it doesn't matter. Not even if it's the same sector, let's say, just reaching out and forming groups to help each other, or even just to exchange jokes on WhatsApp. But knowing that we have a certain weight on our shoulders, and just kind of reaching out and helping each other in whichever ways we can. I think that's also useful within the workplace, to have sort of a women's group to be able to discuss particular topics, especially with regards to prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse. I find it important to have space where those things can come up if they need to, where we can support each other on more intimate sort of internal situations, and figure out, okay, how can we process these things, or what is meant to happen through the organization. So those are kind of the bits that I've learned along the way. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We're coming to you now, Kuwait in South Sudan. You've been leading some of our work related to COVID-19 response, and you've been part of South Sudan mentorship program. And as Adriana has said, there's been a really, really critical role that's been played by others in supporting young leaders to come up. Could you share with us what your journey has been, particularly in the context of you being a young leader in South Sudan? Over to you, Kwei.
Thank you all. I hope you're getting me.
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you. Loud and clear. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'll start by telling you a little bit of my biography. I'm by the name Kwei Julian. As it was introduced before, I'm just a diploma holder, actually from the college. I study out of South Sudan. So when I pursued my diploma in business administration, I had to come back home. When I came back home, of course, I was a young girl. I did not know where to start. But I got an advert that the LWF is looking for the intern, a female intern. So it was my opportunity. And I grabbed it with the opportunity in a way that this could be the only way through that I can succeed and all that. First of all, I put it in mind that I'm going to work with the community. That's saving the community in any way, either advocating for anything or that. I had it in mind that I would do something for my community. And second to it, when I got that opportunity to come to LWF, I was assigned to mostly the program side. So I was assigned to protection officer and social cohesion, and to other officers also like education officer and food security and livelihood officer, along with the catch-based intervention. So all these, when I was based in the protection, of course, I could go and involve in other activities, either a campaign, a girls' child education, or anything related to female in the community. And then based on other side, of course, the gender equality is applied to each and everyone. Along the other supporting offices like the finance and the admin, I was also involved with them. And I knew it at a point, even though I'm to leave LWF at a certain point, I would be proud that I was there with them. I worked with them, the environment was conducive. I know that whatever I said, I would say that is what I experienced, because in South Sudan, we all know there's that recurring conflict in the country. Also, we endure the culture norms so much to the extent that the gender is really needed. The gender equality is really needed in the community. So I had it in mind, plus the mentors that I got from the area coordinator and all the officers at large. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kwei. You can be sure that we in the LWF do appreciate your leadership role, even in your particular context. I think for me, it's particularly interesting to see how your initiative and your own commitment has enabled you to break barriers and to move forward into leading work that is recognized at that level. And as we go to the next part of our conversation, I'm preparing you, Eva Christina, because I'd like you to venture with us a bit around some of the obstacles and barriers that are standing in the way of women in leadership, and maybe also considering some of the strategies that we must put in place in order to overcome them. Could you reflect with us on that question, Eva Christina?
Thank you, Isaiah. Yes, looking at the obstacles, and if I specifically look at the ecumenical sector, I think it's very much a structural issue. It's about patriarchy, and it's about traditions, and I think we can choose if we want to nurture a patriarchal understanding, or if you want to see a different way of relating to each other and organizing our movements and the ecumenical movement, because it's not the biblical. There is not the biblical foundation for inequality, rather the opposite, very much the opposite. I mean, Jesus was able to see each and every one. And I think we need to be reminded about that. But we see how our churches are in many places very patriarchal. So this is something we really have to look at. I mean, many have taken steps towards quota and a quota system, and that is good, and I think it's necessary. But we cheat ourselves if we are satisfied with the quotation, with the quota system, because it needs to go much beyond that. It has to do with mutual respect. It has to do with impact. So I see that as really important. And I think we also need to name it, to say that it's a matter of power. Power is sometimes, it sounds like a word we shouldn't be using too much. But I think it's also important to talk about it in terms of power, and how can we share power. To me, it's very much about acknowledging the gifts that both women and men bring to the table. And we need to really see that. To me, it's also a question of the of what and who is the norm. I have seen so many documents, not least in the ecumenical setting, talking about marginalized groups, and they are named women, children, elderly, people living with disabilities, indigenous people, and you have the whole list. So what is the consequence? Yes, the only one who is not marginalized, seen as marginalized, is the white, middle-aged Western men. And I think it's surely right to name all these groups, because there are different kind of marginalization. But we need to give it a second thought. Who do we think are the norm, who everybody else should relate to? And here I think we have a lot of work to do. We need to turn it upside down somehow, to change our perception of who is the norm. A last thing I would like to mention is the importance of supporting each other. I think the having networks of different kinds, inclusive networks. I know for me personally, that has been important to be with and discuss with women in leadership roles. That has helped me a lot to reflect both on how to be courageous and to understand it's not me that is doing the wrong thing. But there are also moments when I need to correct my own direction and how I'm working. So these networks have been important. I also think the safe spaces are important, because it's not always easy to talk about gender equality, and we need the safe spaces where we come together. And I would like those spaces to be both for men and women. We need groups for men, we need groups for women. I also think that women in leadership should be mandated to lead. Sometimes there is a risk of being a token. So how do we support women to take up leadership? And then I think the last thing I would like to mention is that gender equality is very contextual. We all live in very different situations, facing different challenges. And what can we learn from each other? How can we support each other? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva Christina. Musimbi, Eva Christina mentions power, structure, traditions, norms. She even goes ahead to mention that some of our faith values have been misinterpreted and misused in terms of keeping women out of leadership. I wonder what barriers you have seen when you've been taking up very significant leadership role in global governance and in multilateral structures. Over to you, Mussimi.
Thank you very much. First of all, I really agree with everything that Eva Christina mentioned, because those barriers exist. And so I like thinking of what do we do for solutions, because I like us not staying in a bad place, because I have seen, as I have worked with women all over the world, that women are real on a journey towards getting solutions for themselves and for society. So one of the things that I think is really important to address some of these areas, which I think that we in the church don't do enough of, is creating opportunities, which Christina may have called safe places, but really what needs to happen there is the first thing is self-awareness. For men who are in position, people who are privileged, and we become privileged by many things make us privileged. There are certain things that we're born with that make us privileged. For example, if you are a white person, you're born with white privilege. But when you also get education and you join this, you become also privileged because education has given you privilege. I know that because as an African woman who come from less privilege, education gives me that opportunity to be privileged and to get a space at the table that I would not have had without education. So the first awareness is what to do with privilege. How do we actually face our own privilege? The important reason for addressing how we handle our own privilege is that it helps us to see how we actually misuse power that was mentioned by Anna Christina. Because power is good when we can use it to bring change and to transform ourselves and transform society and open up space for the others and learn to share what we have to do. And most important, be respectful to what other people bring at the table. Because even if you say you're going to be inclusive, but all of the systems that we use are still systems that have been developed in the North, then we are not actually making the biggest changes. Because what it means is that when we people from the South come to join the table of leadership, we are only expected to transform ourselves into Northern people so that even our own Southern people cannot even recognize what it is that we bring to the table. So this self-awareness helps us to think about privilege and how we use privilege and how we allow that safe space to be transformed when new people come to join the table. The second thing that I want to talk about is to understand that even when we acquire some of the privilege, for example, when you deal with women's issues and you look at global leadership in everything, sometimes people are quite satisfied when a woman is on and they don't remember, is this, do we have indigenous women, for example? Do we have women with disabilities? Do we have women who have been racialized by color or by anything else? I, for one, have been in many places a first in high leadership. And when you are first in high leadership, the expectation of you is not only would you be a model, but more often they think, okay, we've achieved it because now we have a Black woman who is leading this organization. In the same way, like President Obama was the leader of the USA, and people thought, well, now Black people are in the leadership and that's the end of the story. That is not the end of the story. It's not even the beginning of the story. It's simply showing the poverty that we have when we are not inclusive by race, when we are not inclusive by culture, etc. And in the churches, we really miss this. In the federation, we still are a long way to address this, and even the General Secretary talked about it. But we talk about it, and we don't do something about it. Because in many of the bodies that we come from, to get to open up for a woman to be the one that is in charge of the system that we are dealing with is very, very hard. is very, very hard. It's easier to open up space for women to be at middle-level management rather than to be at the highest level of management. So inclusion is a long way. And finally, I wanted to talk about something that is important for women. Myself, as I have gone throughout my whole life, I feel that the changes we have achieved have come specifically because women have stood in solidarity with each other. They have stood in solidarity with each other to support one another, to understand what we share in common, but also to address those things that show the differences between us as women. Yet when we go out into the world, very often it's expected that if you're a woman, you're supposed to agree on everything. So when women bring a variety and diversity of opinions on the table, that is sometimes seen as disagreement and it shouldn't be entertained. And I want to say that that's another barrier for getting the fullness that women can bring to the table, because women need to come to the decision-making tables, both with their similarities, but also a lot with their differences. And I have seen that this really makes us much better and richer, whether we are dealing with the ecumenical space, international space of any type. I see it today as I talk to you on the board of the London School of Economics, and I see the same things that I could have talked about in Lutheran World Federation. I sit on the UN Global Compact, which deals with companies, on the board of the UN Global Compact, which really deals with companies that are businesses. And they have similar things in regards to how women are viewed and with how the space is made for women. But indeed, when the inclusion really happens, then the society changes, that organization changes, and the benefits don't go just to women. The benefits goes to everybody. And we miss a lot when we don't actually take in a full inclusion that gives women to be who they are and to bring their skills as well as their emotions, as well as their differences to the table of decision making. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mussimi. I'm going to pose the next question to both Adriana and Maria, and I will request you to answer one at a time. I mean, if you could mention just two key ways in which obstacles to women in leadership can be removed, what could those two be? Should we start with you, Adriana?
Sure. I mean, a main obstacle that I was thinking of that hasn't been mentioned yet, and I just wanted to say it's such a pleasure and an honor to be on this panel and to listen to everyone. Thank you so much. I think one main obstacle is that it doesn't matter actually how far you get up the ladder. It doesn't matter if I'm the boss of a team of 80 persons and that I'm a mother and that I'm over 40 years old. I still have to be ready, whether in a professional context or just on the street, for sexualized comments or innuendos. And this is frustrating as a woman. How to break past that barrier is something that I don't know yet, but it's something that always has to be in the background, right? I think another one, and I also seen it in the comments of the chat, is what about women? So sometimes women who get into positions of power, you see them leading like a man, or you see them not helping other women, right? I think I find myself much quicker to judge other women leaders and other women in general, because I want us to be better. I want us to be perfect. I want us to achieve everything that I know we can achieve. And then that by default makes me somehow harder on women. And of course, the other side of that is, that sometimes when men are saying things in meetings, oh, this guy is mansplaining, okay, and I stop listening, right? So, I mean, it comes, it's transparent in different ways, like how this culture affects everyone and is interpreted. I think what has helped me the most has trying to get back into patience, being patient of, okay, this person is the way they are. I'm not going to change that person, but I'm going to take from there what is useful for me. What can I learn from this, either about myself, about the situation, about the context, and what can I use from here to make my work better and to help my team so that we have better work together. Thanks.
Maria, please.
Yes, thank you. This is really an interesting conversation. I think going back to both what Mussimi and Adriana were saying there, I think one of the big challenges that maybe many women have also internalized is that being in leadership means you need to lead like a leader. And who are the leaders we've been seeing? They are mostly men. And not being able to think, no, I will lead like I lead. And I think one of the challenges is that we also in this conversation too, we think it's all about being a woman or being about a man, where in fact it's also about being Maria. So where my leadership style, if it differs from my predecessor who was a man, it's very easy for me and for my colleagues and my peers and the environment to think that because she's leading in a different way, that's because she's a woman. And I think this is not a very helpful construct in ourselves that we should work on a lot to try and disassociate things like leadership style from gender, because of course they may have an interconnection, but it's not the only determining factor about how you lead. And the other thing that I found really interesting that Mussimi was saying was around the acknowledging differences in opinion, and where if a new person comes to the table, the whole table needs to adjust to a new person coming in, whether it's a man or a woman, or the leadership style or lack thereof of the person coming to the table. And I think somehow just, the ultimate aim of gender justice is that both men and women can be comfortable in and of themselves, whether they're men or women or something else, and appreciate the fact that different people have different skills that are all valuable to us. And I think the more open we can become in not judging immediately that, oh, she's doing that because she's a woman, or, oh, he's doing that because he's a man, the freer all of us will be to grow into the best leaders and the best subordinates and the best colleagues we can be to each other, and appreciate people for their gender, but also for the multitude of other things that make us ourselves as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. I'm going to come to you, Kwei, because you are a leader. You are in the midst of leaders who are slightly older than you and who have been in leadership for a bit longer. I wanted to ask you, as a young leader, what kind of support do you think young leaders, young women leaders, require to be able to take on their leadership role effectively? Over to you, Kwei.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I will talk much about South Sudan from what I see and the environment I'm in. For the young women leaders who are leading others, they have a bigger challenge in South Sudan. As you know, that there's this poverty recurring and there's war, something like that. Their first challenge is environment insecurity. That insecurity can be either abuse or physically in this community, countrywide or within the state. So some women who are leading others, they fear to reach a certain community, or they fear to voice out for some reasons. Another reason for them to fear to voice out can be culture norms. People intend, especially here, people intend to not value whatever to them as leaders to acquire. For them to take that lead to be a leader, that's something that you have to just be with yourself. Others can ignore you, maybe based on your gender, But through your capacity, you can do more. That's why I said the environment itself is the biggest challenge to those women. When it comes to exactly a leader, you have to go through education aspect, of which is limited here. Many girls did not go through that, or many young ladies did not go through that. And the aspect of the gender equality is really denied in this South Sudan. So it's really hard for young leaders who are looking to lead others. But still, the other aspect that themselves, they got encouraged and they move on with whatever they are doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What inspirational words. And I challenge all of us, men, women here who have leadership positions, to remember that young people, young leaders are with us as well. And their time to lead is now, not tomorrow and not in the years to come. So thank you so much for those encouraging words, Juliana. We are about to finish this part of our conversation, and I would actually just like to give all the panelists a chance to, in one sentence, in less than 30 seconds, mention their vision or the kind of change they want to see in terms of women and leadership in the sectors that they represent. So Maria, in the humanitarian and development sectors, what is the one thing you would like to see change?
Thank you very much. I have actually I have 3 points that I want to mention. One of them, contrary to what Mussimi was saying afterwards, in the humanitarian sector, actually finding middle management women is quite challenging. And I think for that, the one thing that really we need to invest in more is also what was being said by Quay. We need to invest in the education of women in the humanitarian context beyond just secondary school level, so that they can move into middle management positions in the field. The second thing I think that is hugely important for our sector is something that Adriana has also been speaking of. We need to make sure that safety and security issues and protection of women against sexual abuse and violence, also our staff, in the context that we work in, this really needs more attention going forward, even though it's improved further. And the third thing I want just to underline is what I was also saying before, is that we need to acknowledge that we need a balanced workforce. We need both men and women in all positions at all levels of hierarchy. This always brings a better working environment where everyone can feel comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Over to you, Eva Christina. What would you like to see change in the ecumenical space?
Thank you. I think the theological work is so important, to root it in theological reflection, and that can give us such a strength that I think is so important. The other one is the structural work that has to be done. It's not enough with goodwill. It is about structures. And the third thing I want to mention is the importance of having both men and women in their diversity on board in order to push changes and to have men and women on board on all levels.
Thank you, Eva Christina. And last but not least, I'll come to you, Mussimi. What would you like to see change in global governance?
I would like to see the really hard work on unconscious bias, because I feel that at the global level, a lot of people have accepted many of the things that we have said. And sometimes they are conscious, they know, they have the data, etc. But that unconscious bias keeps them in their own place. Leaders are afraid to let go because they think that if they pass on the candle, they won't have anything. But really, in the feminist leadership, we usually say, you don't give away your own candle, but you light the candles of the next generation and others as well. So we have room for all young people who could provide the leadership. And then we can move into those spaces where we might be able to provide leadership at any age or from any other place. That fear of letting go is one of the things that I would like to be attention to be given to it, because it will help us also address gender-based violence that keeps women on the ground, especially during this time of COVID.
Thank you very much. Our chat room has been on fire with so many questions and comments, and I would like us to go straight into those. I invite Sko to lead us into this segment. Sko, over to you.
Thank you, Isaiah, and thank you to our panelists for those engaging comments. There has been a lot that has come out of the chat, but in the interest of time, I'm not going to read all the questions, but rather I'll give one question to each panelist. I'll start with you, Dr. Mussimi. The first question is, do you think the LWF's active inclusion of women has had an effect on wider women's rights, especially in Africa? That's for you, Mussimi.
Yeah, I do want to say that every time you do something positive, it impacts people. And the LWF policy has impacted many churches in Africa. But women do get together in public forums and share this information. And all of those women that have had a rubbing or a contact with LWF that find themselves in other spaces bring part of that testimony. I am one of them. I had a lot of early rearing in the LWF, but I take what I learned at that space in every other space that I have been. So yes, but I would not be able to say that I can prove that things that have changed in Africa or elsewhere was because of LWF, because I do think that the issues that LWF is addressing also come to the consciousness of people and to the world in many other ways, and people who are part of the LWF get also impacted by them. Finally, I want to say that the United Nations conferences that we all go to have really had a big impact in bringing us together and helping us to focus, whether it is through those things that we learned in Beijing or through now the generation equality that is going on at the present time.
Thank you, Mussimi, for that. I'll move on to the next question, which is directed to Maria. This says, is there a place for women from poor backgrounds?
Okay, I'm not sure I'm getting the question, but I saw a question related to whether poor women can move into leadership. I think many of us, our personal backgrounds are not from very wealthy backgrounds. I think the most important thing is to get an education, and I think that's the crucial. And that, of course, is linked to extreme poverty as well. But of course, you can also be a leader at any level, and it doesn't mean you need to be a leader of a big organization. You can also be a leader of your community, a leader of your church group, a leader of many different things, and that doesn't necessarily need a lot of funds to be able to move.
Eva Christina, the next question is directed to you. Is it better now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, the question is, within the ecumenical movement, do we have structures that directly support women in leadership? I know you spoke about this in your earlier reflections, saying there is need for support. You spoke about the networks, you spoke about safe spaces for discussion, but are there structures that are in place already?
I think there is still a lot of things to do because patriarchy has a tendency to stay strong, and I think it's important with the with role models to share different ways of leading, and also that there is leadership that is not only related to the ordained ministry. There are others than bishops that can lead, and that goes with if we have an interest of widen the leadership. Are you a leader if you are leading the youth movement? Are you a leader if you are a lay person leading the women's movement? If we want to be inclusive, we say, of course, yes. And this also belongs to leadership. But I don't think it's all there yet, because the churches are very focused on the ordained ministry. And of course, that is important. I'm not questioning that at all. But if we want to be inclusive churches, we need to have a much wider perspective on what leadership is. And I'm coming back to what I said earlier. It is to acknowledge the gifts of both men and women, of ordained and not ordained, and of younger and older people. This diversity is so important, and I think we have quite a bit of way to go in the ecumenical movement, even though much has happened, but we still have a long way to go.
Thank you for that, Eva Christina. I'll move on to the next question, coming to you, Adriana. This is about the perceived lack of support between women whenever they acquire patriarchal methods and attitudes. This is talking about women that rise up to leadership positions, and the general feeling is that once they are there, they start adopting some of these tendencies that we're trying to fight against. What has been your experience, and what can we do about this?
Sure. Yeah, I think my experience in general in those types of situations is I feel like, I will become defensive, or I will try to fight for space. And I don't think that's the best way to go about it. As I was mentioning before, I think it's good to sort of be patient, protect yourself from whatever's going on, and take what you need to learn from that. Here in Latin America, one small thing that we've done to sort of, because in Spanish language, you have the masculine and the feminine way of saying things. And when you say everyone, todos, that is masculine, because whenever there's a plural, the masculine takes over. So this is something very present in everyday language, whatever you're speaking about. So what we do in World Service Colombia, also because we are the majority women, we say nosotras, we say we in the feminine sense. And I think this is just, a small way of saying that it's acceptable to be women. It's acceptable to be part of a majority that is women, also for the men that are in our team. And but I think it's also a matter that we keep working on ourselves, because for me, it is a bit strange sometimes to hear a man say nosotras. So what does that mean? It's because I expected the man to say nosotras, but this is a strange in a nice way, in a welcoming sense, that men are also coming in and being part of the change. So I think we need to hold space for that change. I personally, at least at this point, try not to fight so much against what is not changing, but I need to put my energy in opportunities and see what doors we can open in order to keep building, because it is something constant. We're not there yet. And when I mean holding space, it's not only for women in leadership, it's also for men to be more open-minded, and all of this positive masculinities, giving them space to also be emotional, and also giving space for all races and ethnicities. So I think it's all possible, and we need to work on all of this at the same time. Thanks.
The next question is directed to Kwei. Today, we're celebrating women in leadership because of the work of advocates and role models who have done the groundwork for us. And in the participants' context, the advocates have been women's departments, especially in the case of member churches. But of course, there are different advocates in different contexts. So the question for you, Kwei, is how do we identify the next generation of advocates?
First of all, you're getting me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, first of all, as I said before, if you are to talk of the future generation or the future leaders, of course, there are factors that are pulling them down. And these factors for us to move ahead, to be the future leaders of the country or the future leaders of any kind of a leadership, there are some factors that we have to deal away with before we move to a successful leadership. And these are the first one. The first one is early marriage from where I am. Is early marriage. In this country, the culture norm that we practice and we find them normal. And this early marriage, it can either be 15, below 18. At a certain point, when you get married when you are young, of course, there will be no another hope for you to go through with. Either you want to acquire leadership or you want to go through that, no. So the first one I suggest, or maybe I can encourage, there should be awareness to how important is the girl child education or to a woman education is as a household or a certain community. Create awareness to others to know how important it is. If any girl passed through any certain level like a senior 4 or maybe college like me or a bachelor, that girl, of course, there will be changes in her family, either the way she will take care of the family or the way she will handle the relationship or advocating for others in a community or countrywide. It's a bit sort of different with another girl who got married off at an early age. And then the second one is different gender roles. These different gender roles, sometimes a girl can go to a certain level of education, like how I've been in a diploma or anyone who have gone to high school. A man can tell her to sit down and be a housewife. There, he has limited her from doing any community help or anything, or advocating for others, or seeing her right as a woman who have gone to a certain level of school. So for us to find that there should be leaders, the future leaders, we have to first get to know the root of it. How are these young girls going to get involved in this leadership with these factors that have put them down? Thank you.
Thank you, Koi, for those reflections. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more questions because of time constraints, but there were really comments around addressing verbal sexual assault, whether it's overt or it's hidden. And there were also questions around patriarchy, what's acceptable and what's not, and what's acceptable. So there is a lot really that we could continue to discuss, but in the interest of time, we won't be able to do that. But I want to thank everyone for those questions and those comments that you've given in the chat. I would actually encourage all of us to go through those comments and the reflections that have come through. Now I'll hand back to our moderator, Isaiah.
Thank you very much, Sko. Thank you all as well for the questions and for the very encouraging conversation. I believe I speak for all when I say that we've learned a lot this afternoon and that we've been inspired not only by our distinguished panel, but also by the participants and the questions that they've raised in the conversation this afternoon. As we come to a close of our event, I would actually like to give the floor to all the panelists to take at most 20 seconds to just give their final word of encouragement, remembering that this is the International Women's Day, and also remembering that our work, particularly our advocacy work in the context of the Commission of the Status of Women, is just starting. So I will start with Adriana. Just your final words, please.
Okay, thanks so much, Isaiah. Well, I think the final words would be that this panel is an example of where we're going, you know, where we've come from, but where we're going. And I see it as a bridge to what we can do in the future. I wanted to share that although I've been saying here during the panel that what I try to do is sort of, you know, keep my calm and focus on what I can learn. I also very much appreciate, and I've gone through that phase already, the fighting stage, you know, the activism stage. And I think that that's very legitimate and very important to keep doing. So I just also wanted to clarify my comment that I think all of these different strategies are important, and I think it's good to use as much as possible so that we can reach the transformations that we know are just for our society. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Eva Christina. Your final words, please.
Yes, I would like to pay tribute to those whose footsteps we are walking in today, who have done a tremendous job to pave the road for us that are coming later. And I would also say that I want to stress the importance both of the structures to continue working with them and to be together as men and women. We are both needed in order to foster a healthy leadership in our churches and societies, and leadership on all different levels. So we need to be in it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Over to you, Mussimi. Your final encouragement, please.
As a people of coming on from the faith perspective, I'd like to encourage us to keep up hope. Today is a day of celebration that also names the things that are not going right, but really holds up hope. And I would like to suggest that we remain, like Bishop Toto said, prisoners of hope that change will come. And the second and last is, I would like Kwe and all young people be a sign of hope, that in the next ever, if we ever have another webinar like this, that we'll always let Kwe lead rather than be the one who comes last in the panel.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Kwe. What should be your encouraging final words for our event this afternoon?
Thank you. Oh, it's an excitement moment. First of all, before the past, I think the leadership of women was not recognized countrywide, but now we can be recognized countrywide as women of change or advocating for others. I hope that the young generation be at peace. I will achieve whatever dream that they want in this plan. Thank you.
Amen to that. And last but not least, Maria.
Thank you very much. I also want to echo what Eva Kristina, she talked about giving tribute to those whose footsteps we've walked in. I also think we need to give tribute to those who are younger than ourselves. Kwe and your colleagues in South Sudan and in all of the LWF country programs globally, Adriana, the next level of upcoming young female leaders in the World Service programs, the many church leaders, the younger ones who are making their voices heard. We all need to work together throughout the generations to make change and to work with hope that doesn't disappoint. Thank you, everyone, and happy International Women's Day.
Wonderful. Thank you, Maria. We are also very grateful to you, our panelists, for such inspirational conversation this afternoon. We thank our General Secretary for his opening remarks as well. And we are very grateful for all the participants who have spent their time to be with us this afternoon. I would also like to say a special thank you to the organizers of this event. And I would like to particularly mention Skonzile Ndlovu, Philippa Hitchen, Caroline Veoy, Christine Mangale, Rebecca Daniel, and Katarina Kilunen, who have been in the background putting together this event. We really, really appreciate your work, and we also appreciate the role that our interpreters have played this afternoon. Many thanks to you all, and once again, we wish you a very good International Women's Day. Please keep the conversation going. Reach out to us, reach out to each other, reach out to the panelists in order to keep this conversation going. We would like to invite you to follow our work in the context of the Commission on the Status of Women on the Gender Justice work by following us in our various social media platforms. As you will have remembered, this event has been recorded and we will share with you the video recording of this event. Thank you very much, and a good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all. Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Goodbye.